What exactly do you want out of life? It's a simple question that's sometimes not so simple to answer, but it's worth trying. It's worth it to make an effort because the alternative is just letting somebody else decide for you, which often leads to mediocrity. I'm still very much in the process of figuring things out for myself. I highly suspect that will forever be the case, so I can't pretend to have all the answers. However, this is something that I'm really passionate about, and so I thought I would share what I've learned so far and kind of how I approach answering this question. I believe we've never been more in need of intentionality in our lives than right now. There are just more distractions, more BS calling for the attention of your monkey brain than ever before. The answer to all this, I think, is design. To use the word design as a verb is to do or plan something with a specific purpose or intention in mind. Very few things in our 21st century world happen by accident. In reality, they happen by design. Architecture requires design. Software requires design. Society requires design, and so too does the way you approach your life. Lifestyle design for me is about distinguishing what matters to you and what does not as specifically as possible. This focus on what matters to you is really important because I'm not here to tell you that you can have it all. You cannot, nobody does, and the people that try to sell you that idea usually want your money. The thing is, having it all shouldn't even be the goal in the first place. Again, I think it should be having and doing the things that have the most importance to you. And mediocrity should be defined not as having less, but rather as playing by somebody else's rules. I get increasingly asked, how do I do what I do? How do I travel the world? How do I commission murals? How do I make all this happen? And I'm trying my best to be as transparent about things as possible. So I wanted to talk about my process, my mentality, and my thoughts on the topic of lifestyle design. Let's first talk about what this process looks like. For starters, this is not a one-time deal, I figure out what I want to do and I know for the rest of my life sort of thing. It is really messy. These are difficult questions to answer. And in fact, the answers are going to change depending on where you are in life, in an emotional sense, spiritually, all these things. These changes are going to happen many times throughout all of our lives, and that's okay. I think that's a part of being human. I'm going through a transition of my own right now because I think my priorities are shifting and I got a little bit off track for a while. The life that I wanted to live is not the same one that I wanted 10 months or 5 years ago. And so I've kind of had to go back to the drawing board and think about the changes that I need to make. I think it's really important to put words to the experience, and for me at least, this has often felt like I'm blindly feeling my way around in a dark room, looking for the door or the switch to a lamp so I can see a little bit better. I'm bumping into stuff. I'm stubbing my toe repeatedly. This is because, at best, I only really have a vague idea of where I want to go. This is the truth. It might seem like people out there have it all figured out based on what they put out there, their presentation, their image, but that is simply not the case. Nobody has it figured out. I remember this being explained to me brilliantly a few years ago. Imagine you're trying to go from point A to point B, where point A is where you're starting out and point B is where you think you want to go. Instead of looking like a linear straight line, your progress is going to look something like this. I would add that you're learning as you go, and maybe halfway through the process you realize you don't even want to go to point B. You actually want to go to point C, which is over here. And now you're going somewhere that you didn't even consider when you started. This is one of the most magical and also often frustrating things about life. I have found that having a North Star can help tremendously. In fact, I have two, a professional and a personal overarching goal that I work towards and that help orient me. So here's how I did it. I sat down with a pen and paper and thought to myself, where do I want to be 10 years from now? I have said in the past that I'm not a huge fan of very long-term goals because I find that it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to predict where I'll be geographically, emotionally, spiritually 6 months from now, much less a decade. That's still true. However, I have come to realize that it helps. It helps to have something bigger to be working towards. That something needed to be specific to me, of course, but also malleable enough to weather the test of time. Here's what I wrote for myself. My personal goal is to develop my understanding of who I am and honor it. In one word, self-compassion. I think that will make me a better person. And my professional goal is to realize my potential in storytelling. These two goals for me both lead towards the same thing, which is to deepen my experiences as a human being. I know that's a very abstract thing to say, but I don't know how else to word it. Whenever I'm lost, confused, knocked off balance, I can close my eyes and boom, I'm right back there again. I may not know what to do, but at least I know which direction I need to be facing, and that makes a world of difference. And by the way, the wording doesn't have to be perfect, so just don't get caught up on that. Now, how exactly do you find your North Star? Well, there are no real rules here, so I can't just give you the answer, but I can share what has worked for me. Of course, a prerequisite to absolutely everything here is having a support system of some kind. And I've been lucky enough to always have at least a couple people in my life that keep me on track. That is not trivial, and I cannot skip over that. I think I might have to make a video on how to find the right people, but that is a separate topic. Beyond that, I think you have to really get to know yourself a little bit more, and you can do that in two main ways, in my opinion. I give them two really broad terms, which are input and reflection. Input for me is consuming new information to expand your worldview, basically opening new doors. So that can look like reading a book, watching a video, listening to a podcast, a conversation with somebody, but you cannot learn everything from others. So sometimes that just means experimenting, throwing yourself into new experiences and seeing how you react. Reflection for me is not about new information. In fact, it's kind of in a way the opposite, which is to turn stimulus way down and look inwards. So for me, that looks like meditation, journaling, time alone. Reflection is about processing information, and it's about taking time to piece things together, connect dots, that kind of thing. I have found it extremely helpful to get as centered as possible and reflect on the things that I find myself naturally gravitating towards. What did I do as a little kid before I even knew what I was doing? I remember I used to invent languages that would have words that couldn't translate to English. That's a massive clue right there. Language clearly has something to do with what makes me tick. This is a huge insight if you think about it, because it's a window into seeing what naturally comes out of you before you apply pressure and expectations, which are things that we deal with as adults, right? Another way to hone in on what is important to you is, again, sitting down and making a list of priorities. Take a moment and ask yourself, what can I not live without? I've said this before, but writing these things down allows you to see it, and it allows you to take stock. And there's no wrong answers, so just throw it all out there. Once you have these two North Stars, you can really build them out and expand on these ideas. So what does develop my understanding of who I am and honor it look like? I'm not going to cover everything because you can really go crazy with this, but one of the things that I wrote down was to speak with my hands. That's one manifestation of what this means to me, and it's also one of the main reasons why I moved to Italy. I am very much generalizing here, but culturally, people tend to express themselves physically. Their words are matched by their body language. I thought that was a stereotype, but it is not, okay? It is very much the case here. So I'm obviously making a little bit of a metaphorical interpretation here, but I want to be able to put myself out there without so many filters. And the truth is, I am not there yet. I'm not at a place where I can be radically honest at all times. It means honoring the kid in me.
Daddy, can I watch
What do you want to say?
from right there?
I take a lot of inspiration from people like Massimo Bottura, who is a very famous chef here in Italy. He's kind of a crazy guy, but he also strikes me as somebody who doesn't edit themselves. They did a Chef's Table episode on him, for the record. My favorite show of all time. I get a lot of inspiration from my B-roll from that show, so now you know. One of the manifestations of better storytelling for me is to expose myself to as many cultures and ways of life around the world as I can. What that currently looks like for me right now is to live in different countries for at least a few months at a time. I'm calling this slow travel. It's a lot more cost effective, and I just like things better this way. I think I realized that when I found the more traditional form of backpack or tourist style travel to be exhausting and unenjoyable. Doing things this way gives me the opportunity to sink deeper into the way of life, make connections, peel back the layers, and take time to observe. Now let's take a step back here. Doing what I'm currently doing around the world is not something that felt possible even just 1 year ago. I didn't even know that travel and languages were important to me until I traveled to Spain for the first time when I was 14 years old. It was the first time that I had ever traveled without my family, and it completely opened my eyes to a new way of seeing the world. It was a different kind of trip. The kid that went is not the same person that I am today. And so what was impossible for him is possible for me. For the record, that was 8 years ago. And so it took me the better part of an entire decade to get to where I am. I find it extremely helpful to adopt a mentality of iterations. Who I am, how I live, the things that are important to me are all continually evolving, as they should be for all of us. And at a certain point, you reach a level where your current reality looks nothing like the realities that you knew before. It's kind of like the rules change. The things that I want to accomplish today may not be possible, right? But if I plant the seeds today, they might be possible tomorrow. So again, what does this look like in a practical sense? And I think you really have to build a life around the things that you're after. Whatever it is that you wrote down is your new guidebook. So treat it like it's sacred. And again, if you don't know what you want, keep trying stuff. I stumbled completely by accident on the things that are important to me. And I just think that none of us are born with this information. We're all in dark rooms stumbling around. From there, I placed my resources into the things that felt like they would bring me closer to where I wanted to go. And there's definitely an unsexy side to all of this that never makes it out to social media. I would go months and months without spending a cent on things like alcohol, clothing, dating, not eating out, not going to the movie theater, not buying a car. It really is working towards something because you believe in it, and not at all because it's working. I mean, look at the AdSense that I generated over the last 4 years on YouTube. When you're making 29 cents a day, it can very quickly start to feel like you're just never going to make it. There's one last thing I'd like to add. In my search for mental clarity, I have found that treating things like experiments or little games that you're playing can really take the pressure off. I know this is kind of heavy stuff that we're talking about here, but ultimately, if it isn't enjoyable in some sense, you're just not gonna stick with it. You're playing the long game, you know? I mean, this is your life. I wanna thank Audible for sponsoring this video. I started listening to audiobooks again in the last couple of years, and that has had an enormous impact on my life and has helped tremendously in this process of figuring out who I am and what I want to do. It's a huge part of the input category that I spoke about earlier, and audiobooks have become my favorite medium for consuming new information because they often go so much deeper into a topic than anything else. I also really like audiobooks because honestly, I'm a slow reader. It makes things a lot easier, and the Audible app is fantastic. I highly recommend Yuval Noah Harari's book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I loved and also spoke about another one of his books in the past, Sapiens, and this one felt even more useful and relevant for the world that we live in. It's like his writing gave me another piece to the puzzle that is my life and more clarity on how to move forward. Even if you disagree with him, it's an extremely thought-provoking work. I can't recommend it enough. You can start listening to these audiobooks right now with an Audible free trial. Choose one audiobook and 2 Audible originals absolutely free. Visit audible.com/Nathaniel Drew, or you can text Nathaniel Drew to 500-500. The link is also going to be in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.